This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
Well, first of all, welcome to our first joint research seminar between the Comparative Histories of Asia seminar based at the IHR and the Pearce Institute for the study of anti-Semitism, which is based at Berkeley College. And I'm going to, in the next few minutes, ask the director of the Pearce Institute, who is Professor David Feldman, who is a colleague of mine at Berkeley College. And also, I must say that my name is Naoko Shimazu. I'm a historian also at Berkeley College. And I also happen to be an associate of the Pearce Institute as well. So I'm very, very pleased to be involved in this joint seminar. Now, Dr. Ran Zwigenberg, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm used to Japan, so it's like
Zwigenberg.
Is that it? Zwigenberg. He is the Associate Professor of Asian Studies and History at the Penn State University in the United States. And I think he just took on this role from September.
Yeah.
2014. And 2013.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last year.
Yeah, last year, yeah. And he is a graduate of the Graduate Center for the City University of New York, and he got his PhD in 2013. And then he's been quite busy because he got a postdoctoral fellowship in 2013 to 14 with the Council of East Asian Studies at Yale University. And then he researched, I would say your general area of research so far is on modern Japanese history with specialization in memory and intellectual history. And today is basically sort of like a book launch talk, and his book that you may have seen around, there's I think one or two copies, is called Hiroshima, The Origins of Global Memory Culture. Thank you.
There's one here, there's another one going around, I think, somewhere.
And then we have commentator today, Dr. Ludwig Brock, who is a lecturer in history and at Westminster University. And she was an early career research fellow at the Pearce Institute. Is it Pearce or Pearce? Pearce, okay. Pearce Institute. And Max Weber Fellow at the EUI, European University Institute, in 2012 to 2013 to 2014. And she's got a book forthcoming. It's called Ordinary Workers, French Railmen, Vichy, and Holocaust. So what I'm going to ask is for you to sign this. I don't know if you have one of these signing books too. Do you have one for your seminars?
Oh, no.
Okay. Yeah, if you're not used to the IHR seminar series, we ask all our participants to sign up on this book. So we'd be grateful if you could sign this. And this is the most important statistics that becomes part of the institute's.
It's the archive.
It's the archive. Yeah, sorry. And so, David, would you like to?
I'll just say.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say that it's really a great pleasure. I'm extremely pleased that the Pearce Institute is partnering up with Comparative Histories of Asia seminar. The Institute was established in 2010. And I think just in this context, the one important thing to say about it is that it seeks to reorient our understanding and study of anti-Semitism so that it joins up again, as often it once did, but ceased to join up with the study of racism more broadly. Now, the study of the putting the Holocaust in the sort of next to the study of Hiroshima and cultural memory isn't quite the same thing as looking at the history of racism, but it's clearly closely adjacent. So, I think that sort of co-sponsoring this seminar is very much in line with what I see the sort of mission of the Institute to be, and so I'm really delighted to be able to join NOCO I've been welcoming Ran and this evening, and look forward to his talk very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you. Thank everybody for coming to hear my talk. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me. And because, did we actually start with this?
It's,
okay.
Yeah,
So okay. So, because we're waiting for a presentation, or I'm just gonna start.
yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna start whenever the image is gonna come. We're gonna just follow with them. So this is mostly today will be a talk about my book. I can't talk about a whole book, but just I want to start with talking about the concept of the book as a whole. So the book is first and foremost about Hiroshima, the commemoration of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima, but it's not just about the city or even Japan itself. It's about Hiroshima in the context of a global development of World War II memory, first and foremost about the Holocaust. Something that one of the professors that I studied with, Carol Gluck in Columbia, once said, kind of stuck into my head when I was studying this. She once told us that World War II was, afterward, a world war. It was a global conflict, and as such is entailed a global response. Hiroshima especially was a global, world-shattering event from the very start. So when I set up to read this book, I set up to look at different reactions on this global level. There were not those reactions to World War II in the specific locale, a specific community, whether it be towards the Holocaust, the massacre of Chinese citizens in Singapore or Nanking, or in Hiroshima. They were not isolated from each other. And they were not also isolated from a larger history of the Cold War and what came afterwards and conflicts around them. By focusing on Hiroshima and Holocaust, I try to trace the ways commemoration emerged again as a global response to World War II. Hiroshima from the start again was a global event. It had visitors from all over the globe. You had people like Che Guevara, Marilyn Monroe, Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone Beauvoir. It was a site of intense debate and political importance. From the very beginning, it was seen side by side with events as the Holocaust. One of the things that I try to recover, the same way that David here talked about looking at the Holocaust in conjunction with other forms of racism, it's also about the conflation of, and you're going to see some images today, the conflation of Hiroshima and Auschwitz as twin horrors, twin dangers. Put here. Okay. Twin dangers that the world faced from the very beginning, from August 6th and 7th and 8th, from the first reaction to the atomic bomb. People were talking about it in terms of the Holocaust. Dwight MacDonald, a youth intellectual, said in a famous quote that the bomb has made us similar to the beast of Majdanek. Other peace activists also compared the act of dropping an atomic bomb to the acts of the Nazis. This is a meaning that was lost to us as the year goes by. And today I'm going to talk about how both of those events intersected. Now, again, first and foremost, going back to the Japanese context, this is about how Hiroshima was remembered. How we got to the current memory and commemoration discourse of Hiroshima. Now, Hiroshima, as those of you from maybe familiar from the Japanese side of the room know, is remembered mostly as a passive event. It's something that happened to the Japanese. When you get to the museum in Hiroshima, the first thing you hear is that the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. Was dropped. Genboku wa otosareta. It's very passive, even more passive in Japanese. Something that was done to us. I initially thought it was about amnesia, about forgetting who dropped the bomb, it was about active suppression, but actually it was not about suppression, it's about how the bomb was presented, how it was remembered. It was remembered in such a way as to neutralize the threat of the bomb to the status quo. It was remembered not as a probable result of our reliance on science and technology, but in the words of the epitaph of the central Moorish cenotaph, a mistake, a sort of a temporal slippage into darker time, into barbarity, in the same way that Nazism was also presented and fascism in the European context. There is nothing wrong with modernity as such. Fascism, it's not for everybody, but generally speaking, fascism was not just a problem of modernity, but was somehow we forgetting about liberalism, modernity, and enlightenment as a whole. So Hiroshima's sacrifice was supposed to somehow rectify this mistake, set history right, and put progress back into normal course. That's why Hiroshima was built as a modern city par excellence, equating building a city of peace, equating achieving peace with... Sorry. You see that?
Yeah, it's better.
Right. I'm very tempted to stand. I usually prance around the room, but it's okay. Okay. So yeah, that's how I teach, and I go around the room all the time, and I see all my students like close all the computer, the windows that they open when they're on Facebook. So first of all, it's about history and passive voice. How do we got this idea of abstract victimhood of Hiroshima as a victim? Because Hiroshima was also a victimizer after all. Right, so there's a problem here of abstract victimhood. Second of all, as I already talked about this entangled histories of Hiroshima and Auschwitz, how they were thought about as one single problem in a post-war. Now, when I looked to being a historian, for case studies linking Hiroshima and Auschwitz, I found two distinct cases. One, the case of trauma and psychiatry and psychology, and the response, the psychological response to the bomb. And the other, the case of the Hiroshima Auschwitz Committee, which is a group of people who actually went from Hiroshima to Auschwitz and connected the two places. What is common to both those strands is the figure of the victim of the survivor, the one who gives testimony. Those are always conflated, moving from victim to survivor. Someone who has a moral authority, which is a unique intellectual phenomenon post-war, and goes also to studies of genocide and the studies of the Holocaust. You can see it in both discourses. So the main question of talk today is about witnessing and trauma. The question is whether we have here a global language. Because trauma studies, in memory studies, usually refer to trauma as a global language. It's something we can all share. We are now talking mostly about, when we talk about any kind of event which is traumatic, well, I use the word traumatic right now. When we talk about that's our lingua franca for pain, anywhere around the world. If we talk about the tsunami earthquake in Japan, we talk about terror events in 9/11 or 7/7 here, it's always using the language of trauma. But is it really something we share around the world? If we're looking for different locales of trauma, I'm trying to see what is shared here, what is global. What I see in many of those locales, mostly in Hiroshima and Holocaust, but also in others, like here with the Harkis, which is a case of people who fought in the Algerian War. The Harkis fought on the Algerian War on the side of the French. They lost, they were brought back to France. They were treated horribly both by the Algerians and the French, and the community of the Harkis, which were, by the way, were put in concentration camps, the same concentration camps that were used by the Germans, the French and the Germans. It's a bit complicated. The community actually maintained the wound. They transferred the wound to the next generation. The wound is a big part of identity. And in here we come to maybe the main reason why I'm doing this at all. Very personal reasons, trying to understand what it means to my community. I'm Israeli. And in my community, this presence of the pain, the transference of the pain through political and cultural means, it's very, very important. It's very important. And here you see something that kind of blew my mind. It's a, sorry, I shouldn't do that, right? It's, I'm gonna stand. Sorry, I feel caged in. So, all right. So this is something from New York Times from 2 years ago, talking about how survivors of how people were third generation for Holocaust survivors tattooed the number of their grandparents. what does this mean for us as a community, as a, that we maintain the pain like this? Is this an act of solidarity? Is it something positive, negative? It's something I had to think through. In a way, think about Hiroshima rather than the Holocaust helped me to think about it in a way more objectively. I'm trying to see what transference of pain again, thank you, mean to other places. But before we can talk about this act of transference, before we can talk about how it became globalized through, again, Hiroshima Auschwitz Committee, which is going to be the main event we're going to talk about, I want to talk a little bit about Hiroshima after 1962. Because being that we're in Europe, in the West, I think we're more familiar with the history of the Holocaust and what happened to the Holocaust. We're less familiar with what happened to...
the microphone.
Yeah, sorry. This better?
Yeah, it's not for me, it's just for the podcast.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to start talking about Hiroshima up to 1962. What kind of event, what kind of understanding was of the event, of the community? Because I just came from a conference on the survivor in the Holocaust, in Holocaust memory, and what we see in the Holocaust is a move from thinking about what's called Sherita Plita, the remnant, the Jewish people as survivor, into the individual survivor. And also in Hiroshima, you have a move from thinking about the community of Hiroshima as a city, and the identity of the city, into individual survivors. And this is the move I'm going to do today, and then look at how those individual survivors, how they actually transfer it, those commemoration cultures, from Hiroshima into Auschwitz and back. So, sorry, thank you. So, 1945. As I said before, there were a lot of different reactions to Hiroshima, but the one that you see all over is a reaction of shock, of complete surprise, of understanding of an event that has completely altered human history. The bomb was a secret. No one knew the bomb existed. And it came out of nowhere for the world when it was dropped on Hiroshima. It caused a huge debate about what it means. For many, though, it was something that was beyond representation. It's something that was seen, as Mary McCarthy, the colleague of Hannah Arendt, called a hole in human history. Something we cannot talk about, we cannot comprehend. But humans being humans, when there is a hole, it has to be filled with ideological meaning. In the case of Japan, it was filled almost right away. You have to remember, it was not just about a bomb, it was also about a lost war. About how the Japanese explained to themselves the loss of the war. And this explanation starts right from August 15, from the Emperor's speech in 1945. You can read it faster than I read it to you. But the important thing here is this last line. How is the surrender presented? And it's presented as a magnanimous act, as an act of saving human civilization, of snatching moral victory out of the jaws of defeat. By surrendering, we save the world from annihilation. The sacrifice of the Japanese has brought peace. Now, under American occupation, if you have to remember that Hiroshima was under American occupation, there was a conflation of the American understanding of the bomb and this particular Japanese understanding of the bomb. The American understood the bomb as something that brought peace, saved American army from invasion, saved millions of Japanese civilians. The Japanese understood the bomb, and actually not just the bomb, but their sacrifice, the destruction of the city, as something that brought peace, connecting the same way that Americans did the bomb and peace. This idea of a transformation from war into peace was made into an almost Orwellian understanding of the bomb. It's something that by its bright flash, it says here, Heiwa no Senko, the bright flash, has changed us from a military city, it's kind of right here, it's like a militarism no Toshi, like the base of militarism, Hiroshima, into the city of peace. In here it's even more Orwellian, like Amekudaru Heiwa no Jokeku, the prelude for the peace song or peace prelude that came down from the sky. And if the readers don't understand, you have a picture of the bomb to explain to them. Now again, you have to remember, this is under American censorship, American occupation. They have to speak the language of the conqueror. But it's also something that people really believe in. I'm going to be a little bit cynical and talk about the cynical reasons for it. The ideological, as we said now. There's much more to it, but it's basically ideological. I'm going to talk about financial now. But also we have to remember this also meant a lot for people who had to reorder their lives after the bomb and the defeat. The collapse of their value systems. Finding meaning in an event that was atrocious, that killed all of their families, that destroyed everything they knew. The physical structure of their life, the buildings, families, schools, workplaces, everything's gone. People had to find meaning. And in the transformative idea of from the bomb into peace, they found meaning. This is true also both across the political spectrum. This is a very leftist organization, the Japan Teachers Union. The left also saw the Americans as in the beginning as an army of liberation, and the bomb is something that brought peace, that rid us, the Japanese nation, of militarism and usher us into a new day. This kind of looking into a new day, like gazing into the future, not the past, actually was brought into, for me, like very ironic heights with even the use of atomic energy. As atomic energy is something which signify the Japanese choice of peace. The Japanese will not choose the bad energy, not the bomb, but they'll choose the good energy, atomic energy, which actually lead to the adoption of atomic energy and eventually to Fukushima and another atomic disaster. But in the 50s, this was the discourse, looking to the future. Rosy. I mean, this is, again, it's a place of mass murder. And for me, it's mind-boggling. It's a place of mass murder, mass killing. Less murder, mass killing. Okay, place of destruction. And they commemorate with roses and stars. A lot of this also got to do with financial consideration. First, financial compensation to build this, financial help to build a city. The city needed money to build a city. The city was completely destroyed. They go to the Japanese government. Of course, they can't go to Americans. And the Japanese government say, well, stand in line. There are 120 other cities that were destroyed. 40% of Tokyo, 50% of Osaka. A whole line of cities that were destroyed by conventional bombing. More people died in Tokyo in March 10, 1945 than died in a bomb. The bomb was not seen as unique from the point of view of the Japanese city. The Americans didn't want to give Hiroshima any compensation because they didn't want to make them special. So the city of Hiroshima, in order to get compensation, had to make themselves worthy of compensation, of money to rebuild a city. And the way they did it, in order, again, heed the American interpretation and rebuild themselves as a city of peace. This was also something that you see in even tourism campaign. Again, another financial incentive, because all the industry was destroyed. So they sell themselves a place for people to come and see, as you can see here, atomic cloud, the destruction of the bomb, which seems ridiculous to us, but if you think about it, a lot of those places of death become places of tourism. If you go to Auschwitz now, you see a lot of people who come to Krakow and just go on a tour to Auschwitz to see the site. This is something you see all over the world, and people who are willing to want to come to see those places of death. And Hiroshima was banking on this. So you have all those reasons why people turned into this interpretation of peace. But again, what I want to, even before that, actually, sorry.
Go back to this one?
Yeah, no, this one. Yeah, I was just gesturing. Okay. I want to remind you again, we're going to talk about it in maybe in 5 minutes, is that this is also on a very personal level something to give people meaning. That it didn't happen for no reason. That something good can come out of it. It's something you can see it in the testimonies of the people that talk about it. That something good must come out of it. That it happened for some reason. We brought peace. There is some meaning to it. It helped people rebuild their lives, thinking about it in this transformative way. In a very, very personal level, the victim level. Now, this was, however, a very local story after 1954. Again, Japan as a whole was devastated. Hiroshima was not really talked about too much outside of the city itself because of American censorship. You could not really talk about a bomb in newspapers. You don't have any exhibits about a bomb going around Japan. Even medical information about the survivors was kept secret because it was highly sensitive military information for the US Army. This all changed after the occupation and in 1952 and in 1954, especially after what's called the Lucky Dargan 5 incident. Not going into the details, but basically it was an incident that involved another exposure to radiation by right now Japanese fishermen from an American hydrogen bomb test in the Pacific, which was now the third time after Hiroshima and Nagasaki the Japanese became victims of the bomb. Based on this narrative victimization, much more complicated, but basically based on narrative victimization, now the whole Japanese nation presented itself as Yuitsu no Hibakukoku, the only nation to be destroyed by nuclear bomb. The Japanese peace movement, anti-nuclear movement, built on it in order to present itself as a movement which endorsed not just all of Japanese society, but actually all decolonized people. Presented itself also as a victim, again, of the Americans and a victim of the West, coming together, and you can see in this picture, all people together, coming together for peace. As a mass people's movement against the bomb. Now here, it also fed into Eastern European and communist ideas about the bomb and about American use of the bomb, because the Soviets always presented themselves as the peace camp. Through the Stockholm Appeal and other appeals, the Soviets presented themselves as a peace camp. They wanted to complete, even though they have the bomb from 49, right? But they said this is only for defense from the capitalists. We want complete removal of all nuclear weapons. We want solidarity of the people, again, socialist talk about the bomb. This is important in the context of what happened afterwards. But before we go to, I want to talk again about the survivors about witnessing. As part of this anti-nuclear movement, a survivor movement rose under the name of Hidankyo, the All Japan Association of Atomic Bomb Victims. This came in order to gain compensation for the survivors. Until now, survivors didn't got any medical compensation from the Japanese government or from anybody. It was all through self-help group. Survivors were discriminated against. People didn't want to marry them. They were ashamed of their scars. They were ashamed of their disease. People thought that radiation is genetic. It will pass to the children. Japanese society as a whole, if you're a little bit different, you can experience discrimination. They were seen as polluted, as people to be avoided. This transformative moment, again, gave them strength, and the movement put them on the stand in front of the whole world in 1955 to say, war is bad. We have to unite against the bomb. And why? Because what happened to me. Because of my story. Telling their story, choking with tears, okay? Choking with tears while vowing to fight against war was an act of emotional mobilization. Through coming together emotionally, they transcended all the political differences between the different groups. They brought everybody together. They brought together their private pain and the political goal of the anti-bomb movement. Here I stop, and I go to the Holocaust. As a lot of us know, after the Holocaust, Holocaust survivors were not seen as heroes of any kind. They were seen as some people who should be ashamed that they survived. That they probably did something unseemly in order to stay alive. People didn't believe them. They didn't believe the horrors that they went through. The people who were heroes, the political prisoners, the partisans, the resistance fighters. Not the people who, quote unquote, just went to the camps. Our idea of the survivor as hero is actually something that goes back only to the 1960s. Before the 1960s, Holocaust survivors, either in America or Europe, wanted to integrate with the society. They didn't want to talk about themselves as different. In Israel, the case of it at most, they were discriminated against because they went, quote unquote, like sheep to the slaughter, like lambs to the slaughter. Sorry. which is a quote coming from Abba Kovner, is a partisan leader, Holocaust survivor itself, that talk condescendingly about other survivors, that they weren't brave enough in some way. The implication was. There are various other things going on here: the will to build families, to forget, to build a new life. But survivors didn't speak up until the 60s. You can see it also in terms of legal history if you compare Nuremberg trials with the Eichmann trials. In Nuremberg trials, it was the focus on the perpetrators, on Nazi documentation. In Eichmann trial, the focus was on the witness, because in the Eichmann trial, the Israeli state decided, as an act of, again, emotional mobilization, to tell the story of the Holocaust to the young people of Israel, to tell the whole story of the Holocaust to the world, to put witness on the stand. Very fast, the focus moved from the man, Eichmann, the man in the glass booth, to the survivors telling their stories that were unknown before. In both contexts, thank you. What happened is that survivors gained what Elie Wiesel called a messianic role, a messianic dimension. If the survivor of Hiroshima could save the world from the Hiroshima, the survivor of Auschwitz now should be proud to save the world from the Auschwitz. Now, Elie Wiesel is a bit problematic figure, but you can see, and we've talked a little bit in extremes here, but you can see the commonalities. Now, looked at from Japan, though, the story is a little bit different. This is another conflation of Hiroshima and the Holocaust, but in a different way. What it says here, it says Eichmann replacement, or the people who come after Eichmann, the new Nazis, basically. And it shows the four nuclear power: England, America, France, and the Soviet.
What date is this?
Pardon?
What date is it?
It's 1961, November 5th. You can tell exactly. It's written here. But this is in the time of the Eichmann trial. The Japanese looking at the Eichmann trial, looking at the drama of retelling of the Nazi story from the point of view of the Jews, and what they see is that the new Nazis are this nuclear power, so the new Jews are the Japanese. In their retelling of the story, the Japanese is being a chosen, well, I wouldn't say chosen victims, but being victims of nuclear war, okay, are the ultimate victims. The Holocaust by this time already is turning into a metaphor of complete evil and complete innocence. Complete evil being Nazis, complete innocence being Jews. And the Japanese want to have this solidarity with the Jews. Solidarity of victims. And that's exactly what the group called the Hiroshima Auschwitz Committee tried to achieve. How much with time? Anybody? Totally.
Yeah, we got about 15 minutes.
15 minutes, good. So, Hiroshima Auschwitz Committee started from a very peculiar Japanese historical moment, which is the end of the Japanese struggle against AMPO, the security treaty between Japan and the United States. This security treaty saw the breakup of the Japanese peace movement. There were various other things, but it was a time when the anti-nuclear movement was breaking apart. Trying to reach again unity, they tried to a group of people in Hiroshima tried to reach out to other victims. Okay, and again, use this power of the witness to use the power of the victim in order to reunite the movement and launch another campaign against the bomb. You have to remember 1961, 1962 is the Berlin crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's a time that they think there is going to be a grave threat to humanity. They feel they have to do something. Also, with the failure of the peace movement, they see fascism coming back to Japan. The Prime Minister of Japan at the time, Kishi Nobusuke, was a former accused war criminal. He was the munition minister in the Japanese government, which is equivalent to Albert Speer becoming the Chancellor of West Germany. They had reason to fear. So they decide to come together and they reach out to Auschwitz. But they don't reach out to the Jews. They reach out to the Poles. Remember we talked about the socialist memory of the bomb? So they reached out to the Polish Communist Party, actually the Polish Catholics that worked for the Communist Party, a person named Jan Frankowski, who was also part of an organization called the Hiroshima, the International Auschwitz Committee, which Israeli branch here they cooperated. It was mostly of political prisoners, not of Jews. It was an international, all-European organization from both East and West. They tried to commemorate the memory of Auschwitz. And the Poles that were more or less controlling at the time tried to reach to Hiroshima basically in the same way that we saw before. Can we go before? Sorry. To equate America with the Nazis. Okay? America dropped the bomb, and the Nazis created a factory of death in Auschwitz. Capitalism equal nuclear annihilation. For interest time, I'm going to skip Singapore. I mean, it's very interesting. They go to Singapore, they meet victims of Japanese imperialism, they meet victims of the Japanese Imperial Army. For the first time, they're not just victims, they're also victimizers. But for interest time, I'll skip it, and I'll go to Israel and Poland, because what they see in Israel and Poland is a different trajectory of transference of pain. It's a different idea. If in Hiroshima, the pain of the bomb was used in order to build an anti-nuclear movement, in Israel it was utilized in order to have a nuclear program, because the understanding of Israel that in order to prevent another Auschwitz, you have to be strong militarily, which include in this particular time, exact same time, the building of the mononuclear reactor, getting a nuclear bomb. It's completely diametrically opposed position, but in both cases, they use the memory of the tragedy in order to justify it. They do not really get along in Israel. It's not black and white. They had a lot of allies in Israel as well, but in the end, they leave Israel in a hurry. They drop it completely from the itinerary, from the report that they write back to Japan. It's like they've never been there. They write it as if they went from Turkey to Europe. I think it's because they just couldn't really deal with this. Anyway, the same way they couldn't deal with Singapore, another place that they almost completely dropped from their reports. Now, in Poland, however, they found complete understanding. And here we come to the height of their campaign, maybe like the height of, for me, like the height of my book, or maybe even this talk. The moment of complete understanding between the Poles and the Japanese. The Poles, like the Japanese, have also had this victim identity, victim mentality. They don't look at Auschwitz as a place of Jewish suffering, but look at the place of Auschwitz as a place of Polish suffering. They understand it as part of a long trajectory of victimization of the Polish nation, the Christ of nation. And they see for themselves a new role, very similar again to the role that Elie Wiesel gave to the Jews and to the Hiroshima, his movement gave to Hiroshima. You'll see, for example, one survivor of Polish survivor said, "Out of the suffering, we will create a future, a new socialist future. We feel the experience of those who were in the camps could lead to the creation of a culture for all of humanity." So again, you have this trajectory into the future. And not only they understand each other in terms of narrative, they also understand each other in terms of the meaning they give to Holocaust objects and Hiroshima objects. Because in the height of their tour, when they go to Auschwitz on January 27th, the date of liberation, it's a Buddhist ceremony they did. They have this ceremony where they exchange mementos of death, they call it. They bring a brick from Hiroshima that was exposed to the bomb, a bottle, and various other objects, and they get from the Poles a present of human hair, cloth, shoes, a tin of cyclo B to be taken to Hiroshima in order to be buried next to the ashes of the victims. Following this, they received the remains of bone ash, ikotsu, which is mixed ash and bones. Of the 4 million, that's the number of the Poles used for Auschwitz. So the tragedy of Hiroshima and Auschwitz will never be repeated. So the actual dead here are conscripted for the cause of peace. There are now victims of fascism, victims for peace. Their remains will be taken to Hiroshima and used for the cause of peace. The problem is, it didn't really find out that way. because this idea of obstructive victimization, which worked very well maybe in Poland, didn't work well in the changing world of the 60s and 70s. So the 60s and 70s also start the time of the Vietnam War, of greater polarization in Japanese society over war memory. And you can see it with the problems they have when they come back. They come back and the right-wing, well, LDPs, center right-wing mayor of Hiroshima don't want to accept the ashes. You accept it here, but then after a week they bring it back and say, we have no space for it, sorry. To make a long story short, in the name of time again, they decide to double up their effort and create the Hiroshima Auschwitz Committee, a permanent organization to bring the memory of Hiroshima and Auschwitz together. And they're actually pretty successful. For about 15 years, they have a good run of exhibitions that they organize in Hiroshima and all over Japan. They create a formal organization together with the Auschwitz Memorial Camp. They get more Holocaust objects. They get more ashes. They get at least another one urn of ashes that I have, at least the one I have proof on. I heard about 4, but I have proof for 2 in the documents. And you see here one that they have organized in Tokyo. And go to the next one. And then they decide to build the Hiroshima Auschwitz Memorial Hall, a permanent place for all of those objects, a permanent place for the ashes that will forever cement the connection to Hiroshima and Auschwitz. But by the time they do this, they already live in a very different world. The mid-70s, after the 1967 war, 1973 war, complete change in the status of American Jewry in relation to the Holocaust, complete change in relation to the West to the Holocaust. You can think about the Frankfurt trial in the 60s, the 1978 Holocaust TV series. The Holocaust is seen more and more as a Jewish event. And they tried to change with it. They wanted to involve more of a Jewish memory. They go to Yad Vashem in Israel, they go to America to raise donations. But the minute they try to do it more of a Jewish event, they get into trouble. Because now Chinese and Korean groups, it's 1982, around the time of what's called the textbook controversies in Japan, say that they shouldn't be in Hiroshima Auschwitz Memorial Hall, it should be like an Nanking Auschwitz Memorial Hall. Or following, they also have Comfort Women Memorial Hall. Hiroshima is not a victim, he's a victimizer. From the other side, from the Jewish side, you have Arab groups coming to the Japanese and say, this is Israeli propaganda. Again, 1982 is the time of Lebanon War. Sabra and Shatila massacres that make the Israelis look really bad in international media. It wasn't done by Israel, it was done by Christian militias, but still, Israel came out really bad. The real, and you see here a letter from the PLO to Hiroshima City, the real victims now are Palestinians and other Jews. The real equivalent to Hiroshima is Beirut. They got caught up in all this web of competing victimization. The idea of the noble victim coming together to save the world is no longer tenable in the world of the 80s, and you get even more so in the 90s. In the end, it all collapsed. And what we're left with is this memorial. It is a small tomb for the ashes, where the urns finally were buried in a temple, Mitaki. It's a mountainside temple in Hiroshima. Every year, January 27th, there is a small ceremony. Usually there is just the abbot of the temple and a few nuns, and that's it. No one knows about this place. The whole episode is completely forgotten. So why is it important? Why did I spend 5 years of my life chasing it? Well, I don't know. We sometimes ask ourselves this. Well, it's important. It's a blip on historical radar. It's really not that consequential to think about the big picture. But what it shows us is a convergence. It shows us that different narratives of victimization, different ideas of Hiroshima and Auschwitz, different ideas of, again, pain and memory have come together. Those people are actual agents of memory cultures, come from side to side. And they're not the only one. There's still people from Japan going to Auschwitz every year. There's still, and way in part of can you go next one? As part of there's a whole web of NGOs that work for transnational justice. They're bringing victims together. There's a whole idea, a new idea since the 90s, that to talk about the pain, to bear witness, is something positive, which can build a community of an empathetic community, a community that will bring justice. But looking at this history, we see that it's, at least I think it's very difficult to build any kind of solidarity based on pain and hurt, because pain and hurt, at least from what I see in this failed effort, is something which is very localized. It's something which is usually based in a community. It doesn't mean that transnational justice is not something positive or something we cannot utilize as a concept for reconciliation, but I think we should be wary of basing our efforts on pain, because it's a pretty shaky ground, and in a world that is still seeing the effects of Hiroshima, Fukushima, atomic energy, is still seeing acts of genocide all around the world, we need to think carefully about how we can create this idea of transnational justice, transnational solidarity, something we shouldn't forget. Okay, thank you very much.